more deeper into the schematics of the genetic algorithms. How do they work, and how's the mathematical interpretation of these, and how uh, what is the underhood working of these genetic algorithms. But this class is going to be more or less just the theoretical inference of like how we come about to understand the theory behind the genetic algorithms. So it may sound a bit more like a biotech class. So just bear with me, because this is just to have an understanding that where we have uh, where we have gotten the intuition of behind these behind the intuition of working behind these genetic algorithms. And if you come across the terms like uh, evolutionary computing or genetic algorithms, genetic programming, or evolutionary programming or evolutionary studies, these are more or less the is this what the bioinformatics all about? Bioinformatics can entail more than this. This is not. This is more tuned towards the medical field, but not to this. But this has some uh, basic genetical theory, basic theory of genetics that you have to understand to some extent. Not necessarily the all of it, but just to understand where the we have gotten the intuition for such algorithms. And the application of such algorithms is still out there. There are some new papers who have worked on like using these as optimization algorithms for getting better results for the machine learning. uh, so they work in tandem with the modern approaches as well. So it may look like that these algorithms are outdated and they are not into practice, but they still are, and it's a bit of a niche, but they are still, like I said, with computer science, you never know which part of the field, or which part of the model, or which part of the concept will just be brought back to life uh, all of a sudden, right? And then it becomes popular and people start following it. Again, so that's why, in case you might think that this is not that relevant, so all of this class is also relevant. If somebody wants to go into this niche, it's an interesting field, it's an interesting topic. So you can find your niche in this part as well. So coming back to the topic, uh, so some of the terms that go hand in hand are like evolutionary computing, genetic algorithms, or genetic programming. So some of these terms are unanimous, or you can say, or synonyms in this subject, in this concept that we are going to discuss. So what are the bases of genetic algorithms? Much of you are aware of the evolution theory, right? So I believe all of you are. Just to get a gist of this evolution theory, there are two major theorists in there. One is Lamarckian theory, and the other one is Darwinian theory, right? Without going into the details of each of these theories, just you have to understand the basic concept behind the evolution theories is that organisms tend to evolve to some extent over the time, and this evolution takes based on some of the traits that we may have, and these traits are selected based on how much strength they give to an individual or to an organism to make them survive in an environment. So what happens, the good genes or the good traits, or they are forwarded to the progenes, they are forwarded to the next generation, while the lesser or stronger or weak genes or the weak traits, they are forgotten along the way. This is the main concept behind the Darwinian theory and the Lamarckian theory. But let's read about it. What do they have to say a bit more into it? So Lamarckian theory, that was formulated as a theory of evolution in 1801, and his basic idea was that the organisms are molded by their environment and pass these genes onto their descendants. So what that means is that the environment is sometimes it brings about some kind of changes into an individual, and these changes are then forwarded into the next generation through some kind of means. Like, we understand the reproduction is a means of like how these traits are forward to the next generation, right? And he basically like he gave an example, like for example, blacksmith would acquire muscular physique after a lifetime's work at the forge iron factory, and his muscular traits will be forwarded to the next generation, onto his children. How much of a credibility is there? It was actually discredited by another uh, another genetic engineer back then. Mendel's work. His work was recognized after his death. But however, that led to some understanding that how the genes how the genes can be taken from parents and how they are forwarded to the progeny or the children. So it wasn't necessarily the exact how Lamarckian theory had proposed, but it somewhat gives an idea that yes, there is some kind of happening that go from parents to the children, and children have some kind of traits from both the parents, right? So if you might have understood in your high school, or I'm not sure if you have read the genetic work of the Gregor Mendel. So he worked on the Drosophila, and then he concluded that how the stages of the how the crossover and all take place, and these are the very concepts which we have borrowed from this field into the computer science. So that is the gist of it. So just to take away from the slide is there are two theoretical bases. One is the Lamarckian theory. So Lamarckian is mostly based on that environment molds organisms, and this brings about some changes into the organisms or the humans, which is passed on to the next generation. So Darwinian theory is a little bit different in this context. So what it says is basically it's a random indirected variations. These variations can be produced from the struggles within the environment and within the organisms or within the species itself. And to understand the Lamarckian theory is, if you have to summarize it, so basically it's based on the principle that says that the physical changes occur in an organism during their lifetime. Like, for example, the greater development of an organ or a part through an increased use, like an example that we gave earlier, and this could be transmitted to the offspring. But Darwinian theory is mostly is a broader concept where it talks about the natural selection, it talks about the adaptability, it talks about the survival. So in nutshell, if you have to understand Darwinian theory, we don't have to agree to all of it. Like, of course, one of the concepts about Darwinian theory is that humans have evolved from apes. That is completely preposterous. There's a large part of the community that outrightly shuns it. But some part of it, like the concept of like natural selection or the concept of adaptability, it does occur in the what do you call it, in the environment. It does occur among the organisms, and we see it. It's a part of a process of survival. So it doesn't necessarily have to be like completely backing up his theory of like that humans have evolved from the apes, but there is some kind of basic info on that. Yes, organisms eventually over the time they do go over some kind of changes which help them to adapt to the environmental conditions. So that's what you have to only remember from it. So basically it leads to some variants that equip them to survive better, and these traits or these characteristics, these are then transferred to the next generation through the process of reproduction, so that it allows the next generation to also survive better. And he caused them. He gave them name as gametes, right? Gemules, I think. Gemules, not the genes, but he initially coined the term as gemules. But his concept of gemules was very a bit different than what we understand through science now. What genes actually are, right? So the main differences between Lamarckian and Darwinian theories: Lamarck saw an individual creatures as plastic. What it means is that the humans could like the organs or the organisms could bring changes into their being itself through some environmental through the environment, or through exerting more work or more effort on some part of the organs of the organism, and they will evolve eventually. Like, for example, we gave an example earlier about the being a blacksmith being muscular, right? And these were shaped by the environment, with the results being passed to the future generation. And then we also saw that Gregor Mendel, when he showed that how the genes actually chromosomes takes, how the partition of the chromosomes takes place, how the genetics takes place. So it most outrightly threw this concept of theory out there. So it is not considered to be that valid in the scientific field. But anyhow, the Darwin is also quite similar, but it is that the characteristics are basically it's based on the natural selection, that some of the characteristics are developed, then they are which could be more advantageous. And if the organism does not learn to or adapt to these advantages, there's high likely chance the organism will not survive. And the ones who survive, they have the best of the characteristics and traits, and these traits are or followed on to the next generation. So in his opinion, this was the way of the nature selecting the best candidates for progeny, for the reproduction and for the survival. And in his opinion, these individuals basically were tested by the environment. Okay, so these are the main two concepts, main differences by the Lamarckian and Darwinian evolution. And to this part, the inheritance is an important concept, right? So evolution is one thing, that how the changes take place. But then the second thing is, when the evolution takes place, how this is inherited by the next generation. So according to the Darwin's concept, he called that there is he said that every animal or every body, they have a discrete seed, which is called a gemule, and it's capable of forming some part of the gene. So it's very much similar to what we understand. Maybe his idea was similar to what we understand genes by now. But however, his concept was that it's gathered inside the reproductive organs and passed on during the reproduction. Partly that's true, but not entirely true. So the theory never attracted much support, chiefly because gemules themselves proved obscure. But later on, Hugo de Veres, his full name was Hugo de Veres, came to the conclusion that the plants have discrete part of inheritance, which he called pangenes. So this concept was very similar to the gemules. And finally, it was the work of Gregor Mendel. He actually elaborated how the genes actually pass on to the next generation. And we don't have to go into the details of it, but there are some concepts that were understood. These concepts, right, it's called meiosis, that how the partition of the cells takes place. Meiosis. I'm not sure if any of you have like medical background, you would have, it could regenerate some memory. So meiosis and crossover. Now, these are the important concepts. We will try to understand a bit more into it. Sorry, there's always an issue with this one. So we will try to understand a bit into it. So when we come to the genetic algorithm itself in computing, so some of the basic traits, some of the basic takeaway that we would have in there is basically the that the genetic, it takes place from what do you call it? So it would have sorry. So it would have like a part of it would include crossover, a part of it would include meiosis, and a part of it would include fitness check, which is a concept close to the natural selection, or a concept close to the adaptation. So these are some of the concepts that we have actually taken from these. So that's why we are discussing this thing. And this leads us on to understand that how, because of the Mendel's work, he worked on the he worked on the concept of genetic engineering, right? And for the genetic engineering, chromosomes play an important role. Chromosomes are the basic, you can say, uh, evolving basic unit that help us to transfer the traits from our parents to the child. So what he did is basically he understood uh, that these chromosomes are the uh, uh, basic reason that how the traits are transferred, and each species has a distinctive number of chromosomes. Like for humans, we have 46 chromosomes. These are these are put in 23 pairs, right? And like while mice manage with 20 and humans possess 46, right? So but these are in pairs, like 23, and each pair is one from the female part, the other and other part is from the male part. Okay, so what you have is basically uh, like you have a yeah, yeah. So you have X, right? These are the chromosomes, and then you have XY. So depending upon what means, if it's they form, it can be XY or it can be XX, depending how the crossover takes place. And depending on this, we have some successful traits achieved from the parent side, some successful traits achieved from the father side, and then the individual we have is basically is assumed to have the best of the traits for him to survive in the environment that is there. Okay, and that's how we come to understand that chromosomes are the basic responsible for carrying inheritance information, and each pair of chromosome consists of one contributed from the mother and one from the father. This is what I was actually discussing earlier, right? In the previous slide. Now coming to the genetic algorithms and theoretical basis on it. So there are some things that we learn from the genetic evolution. So this is something called first of all, how the initialization takes place, the population, the population generation. From the population generation, you have an assessment how the which ones or which among these populations will have the best traits. Okay, these best traits will be selected on some kind of algorithm or some kind of assessment. After you have that, then you will select those traits, and these selected traits will be passed on and saved and passed on to the next algorithm, which would help to do a selection, right? Based on, we can have like rank based selection, or we can have a roulette wheel selection, which I will be discussing in a bit later. And after that, based on that, once we have selected the genes, or we have selected the best traits, or we have selected the best optimized space, or you can best space, best, uh, whatever you want to call it, you can call them variables, you can call them best traits. So you basically cross over them so that you create a pool of best solutions for a particular problem. So this the initialization of what are the how did it come out to be is basically like any other particle swarm optimization we had ant colony optimization, so right. So we had always gotten the inspiration from the environment, and genetic algorithms are also uh, no exception to it. So let's see how uh, what kind of problems that we try to resolve with the genetic algorithms. So most of the problems that we have come to apply to is mostly optimization problems. That we have a problem, and there is a set of solutions to given to this problem, but we don't want the best of the we don't have to have the precise solution, but we somewhere land down where there is a solution that could actually solve this problem, given some constraints and given some condition. Very much similar to the particle swarm optimization techniques or the ant colony optimization techniques that we have seen so far. So this is just a like I said, each answer is correct, although some answers are more correct, more useful than others. So basically what we're trying to find is, we are trying to find some optimal solution. It may not be the exact correct solution, but there is some optimal solution laying down there. And for this, we have to understand what are the basic components of genetic algorithm. Okay, so the basic algorithm, if you see, what you have is, you will come across these terms. You will have genes, you have gene, you have genome, and then you have some kind of fitness landscape, and then you have reproduction, and you can have mutation also. So these are the concepts, some of the concepts that we will discuss in this class. Okay, and then you have also, you have genome, you have reproduction, and you have crossover. These are all concepts that are very inherent to the genetic engineering. And we somehow have borrowed these concepts into the computing through binary information. So like I said, this class is mostly going to be theoretical about it. So it's going to be more seem like a bio class. So we just go about it as it is. So if you have any questions along the way, just don't hesitate to answer. But these are some of the basic concepts that we are going to discuss, and these are very inherent to the bioscience field. So what are the examples of it? Like, for example, if you look at this question, when was DNA discovered? If you look at it, all these may be correct answers, but the most precise answer is the 869. So what genetic algorithm does is, it will try to rank all of these values to some kind of schema, and after that it will try to see that which of these have higher ranking and the lesser ranking. The lesser ranking answers, you just throw them away, you just keep the higher ranking. But now the question is, on what basis will you do the selection of these rankings? If you have a strict criteria, you may lose the diversity of having a wide diversity of solutions to a problem. So based on that, we have some concepts that we are going to discuss. And these concepts are also discovered or based on the bioscience. So we are going to discuss some of the basic concepts related to it. So what you have is, you have a hill climbing search strategy for tackling a type of a problem. A genetic algorithm is another, in essence, that attempts to find a solution to the problem by running many searches in parallel, strategy comparable in some ways to the ant colony optimization and swarm techniques, like I said earlier. In this case, importing now of the gene, reproduction, inheritance, fitness, and natural selection from evolutionary biology. With the GI associate, we have peak thorough of the landscapes with fitness. One of the ways that you can visualize of the working of genetic algorithm, if you remember in the previous examples from the symbolic, we used to talk about state space. Then we talked about the input space, right? We called about the geometric space. So in order to visualize the working of what we have is, you can think of a valley of highs and lows. And what you have is basically and all of the solutions are trying to reach to the peak. So what we have is, if you have a set of problems we direct from here, we always try to reach to the nearest peak that we have. It may not be the optimal solution, but there could be some another optimal solution in here, but it could be one of the solutions to the problem. So what we are trying to do is, through the process of reproduction, inheritance, fitness, and natural selection, we are trying to find a solution that could be that could be one of the solutions to the problem that we are going to solve. That is the idea of genetic algorithm. Now, why do we say that it's a genetic algorithm? Because we use the similar concepts like reproduction. What we have is we combine some of the solutions together. After we combine some of the solutions together, we do some kind of selection so that these solutions we select and then we pass on to the next case. And we see that among these solutions, which could be the best of the solution. And then we check their fitness. And finally, we select that if a particular selection is able to resolve this problem clearly. So that is what basically the takeaway from this part of the slide. But as we go down the slides, as we cover more slides, it will be the concept will be more clear. So what we have in our fitness landscape, a GA does not use a single searcher, but many, perhaps thousands, initially located randomly along the surface. So what we have is we have think of these as randomly selected variable pieces of information, which help us to find which have to find the peak, and these all can run in parallel, like at the same time. So after that, we have some kind of process ranking to finding the solution. And then a searcher is tested as a potential solution to the problem. Those lying at the lower points down the landscape are classified as failures and eliminated. Those lying at the bottom of the valley, we just simply discard them because we don't need these answers because these may not be the potential answer to the problem. So we just simply discard it. And if you look at it, this concept is similar to the natural selection, right? And those close to the fitness peak survive, spawn newly nearby search. So whichever is close to these peaks, these actually help to find nearby peaks there and try to find if the solution can be in one of those peaks. So think of it as a mountainous valley where if the solution lies down somewhere at the bottom of the valley, it's discarded. But if it's more closer to the peak, nearby peak, calculated by some function, we say that this could be a potential solution, and accordingly we then draw some line and we see if according to that line we have some similar peaks around, and then we jump onto that and we alternately check the solution on that peak. So this is how the genetic algorithm works. And this test will be repeated for second time, then again until we have until we converge on the highest peak, clustering around the best possible solution. And the way it is done, that's where the resemblance to the genetic algorithm, genetics comes, and that's why hence we call them genetic algorithms. The less fit researchers are progressively eliminated, the fitter survive, reproduce. They give actually a plausible way to search for more further peaks nearby, which can have a solution to the problem. Now, along the way, we have to understand what are the genes in the genetic algorithm concept. We have to understand what is a genome. If we talk from the biological perspective, a gene is simply a trait that is passed on to the parent, right? That is a representation of the parent to the child. It can be anything. It can be the color of the skin. It can be the color. It can be the color of the eye, right? So having that an example, like say for example, this is one gene. This is like say eye color. Let's say it's blue from the mother, and this is the eye color. Let's say black from the father, right? So this individual, these will have this is called genes, right? A genome will be a combination of these. Like for example, either we can have a combination of these, either blue and let's say blue and green, right? And based on this, one of these two will be chosen. So basically, you have a combination of solutions, or it could be completely a different solution which neither of the parents have it. Then this is called something mutation. This is also an important concept in genetics. So when does mutation happen? It also can be, it can be deliberate or it can be induced. Sorry, it can be induced or it can be natural. So when do we do the mutation? That is something that we cover in future slides. So this is the basic concept uh, so a pool of solutions, a pool of genes, a pool of genes results into genome actually. Okay. In this terminology, what you have is a pool of, you can say a pool of set solutions, or you can refer to them as genome. Something as a state space, or the concept that we had come earlier. But let's see the precise understanding of it through some examples. So you have GA. Okay, what we have is genetic algorithms use artificial genes strung along genomes. Artificial genomes or strings stored ordered piece of information. Commonly, these are strings of bits or binary values. It can be either 0 or it can be 1, often just referred to as bit strings. A bit might directly represent a Boolean value, or it's a group of pieces can be strung together to form more complex values such as numbers. For example, we want to create a genome to represent basic information about rooms with just 3 genes. So let's say, for example, we want to have an information about a room. So we have what would be the gene in here? So each bit that represents the length of the room, a width of the room, and height of the room will represent 1 gene, right? Sorry, it will represent 3 genes. So for a room for 4 meters, 5, 3, 3, 2, and 4, we will have, if we have to represent 3 in binary, it comes out to be 0, 1, 1, 2 comes out to be 0, 1, 0. So, and 3 comes out to be, 4 comes out to be 1, 0, 0. I hope you know the conversion, right? It's basically 2 raised power 1, 2 raised power 2 power 0, 1, 2. You know the conversions. I believe everybody knows it. So this will be individual. These will be individual genes. And what would be the genome in here then? Genome would be a combination of all of these genes. Like this will become, if we start from length, this one first, and then that is 1, 0, 0, and then 3 meters, and what would be 3, 0, 1, 1. And then our genome would be 1, 0, 0, 1, 1, 0, and finally 0, 1, 0. Right? Am I doing it correct? Basically 3 strings. 1, 0, 0, this one, 0, 1, 1, and 0, 1, 0. This is something that I try to make you understand from the biological point of view, right? So you have genes, you have traits from each of your parents. It could be anything. It could be the color of your eye, color of the skin. And then each of these can have, when you combine them together, this basically forms a genome. So genes are interpreted by external programs whose job is to evaluate these strings. So based upon, so some kind of, we can have some kind of another program that will help us to determine determine the fitness level of these genes individually. So which of these genes give us a better solution? We will see this as an example as we go ahead. Now, think of a trivial hypothetical genome that can be used to determine what to do in our spare time. So this genome, we want to have an understanding like how these genomes and how we can actually bring this concept of biology into the genetic computing. So let's take this as an example. So we have an example where we want to have a hypothetical combination of genes that would help us to determine what we should do in our spare time. So how do we code it? So in here, the genome will contain 2 genes, one bit long, each one bit long. The first bit tells if it's a daytime or night, in which case we will choose or night, in which case we will store a day. So what we will have, we will have 1 for the daytime, and 0 for the nighttime. The second bit will store 1 if it's a weekday. Then we combine another bit to it. The second bit will store 1 if it's a weekday, or 0 if it's a weekend. So if it's a weekday, then we can say that it is nighttime and it's weekend, because 1 represents the day and 0 represents weekend. Similarly, you can have combination of, so the genome that stores day at a weekend is 10, 1, 0, the nighttime during the week 0, 1, and so on. Okay, a program can read this genome from left to right and choose the action to perform depending on the value of each gene. A computer program for reading of a simple genome would like something like this. Okay, this will give a better understanding what is being discussed in here. So what you have is, you basically code, if it's a day, then you call it as 1, and if it's the night, you refer it to as 0. Then you append another gene to it, also based on 1 and 0. The second gene would mean whether it's a weekday, if it's 1, if it's not 1, if it's 0, then it is a weekend. Okay, so if it's a daytime, then if the gene is 1, and if the second gene is also 1, that would mean it's a daytime, right? And it's a weekday, 1 is a weekday, then simply go to the work. But if the second, it's a daytime and the second gene is weekend, then go to the beach. Okay. Else, if the first gene is 0, that is the night time, then if second gene is also 1, that means it's the day. Then watch TV. It's a weekend and it's a day. Just simply, sorry, it's not a weekday. It's a weekend and it's night. Then simply watch TV. Else, if second gene is 0, it's not a weekend and it's a weekday, then simply go out to dinner. What you have to basically understand in here is, this is some of the basic common day-to-day problems that we can understand these in the form of concept of in the concept of genetic engineering. So in here, the 1 will form the gene, but the combination of these different solutions will form the gene pool or the genome. Okay. Now, having another example of it, let's see the travel sales problem. If we have to look at it, we can make this also into an idea of a genetic algorithm problem. So what you have is, we can see this as a sequence of zeros and ones, right? Depending upon how we write the program to interpret it. So once again, we have these, and there are some heuristic values associated with it. So so we would have 5 steels, and what we will do is, we will concepts of for the illustration. Let's take an example of 5 steels, and genome consists of only strings of bits. So all we need to represent. So we will represent each of these steels by a unique string. So this will consist of gene, and what we'll have is the set of solution, or the genome, is basically a combination of all of these values. Depending upon which solution do we take, whether we take 001 or 1010, so that would depend on some kind of fitness check that we do. That's where the concept of fitness comes in. Something very similar to earlier, and in here the fitness, in this example, the fitness function could be simply checking the heuristic value, right? In here, if you look at it, just having the values of the city as binary values, we don't have much information about it, but except for that, what kind of combinations we can put them in, right? Now, the important thing is how do we deduce that what kind of combination to reach to a certain city would be ideal or optimal? We have to have some kind of fitness function, right? So the important is to represent a potential solution to ASP when evaluate a special program designed to eliminate estimated fitness. Obviously, such program would place door at a low position on the fitness scale so as to possible TSC would not survive for long. Programs that evaluate the fitness of potential working of any GA, these are known as fitness function. Okay, so this fitness function can be evaluated based on some kind of schema or based on the heuristic value that is associated with each of it. So let's see. As a part of natural selection, so what we will have is we will throw out the weaker sequences and we will discard the weaker strains. How we would consider the weaker strains? Probably we will check the heuristic values associated with each of the genes, each of the combination of the genes. Unlike the tests of the survival found in the natural world, the tests faced by the artificial provided by the early specific computer programs, the tests are all known as fitness functions. I think this is already discussed. This precise function depends on the task. In TSP, this is simply a matter of evaluating the length of the tour. In this case, another optimal parameter, protein folding, say. So basically, what we do is we see the strength of the combination of either 0, 0, 0, 0 or 0, 1, 0. What would be the combination strength of it? What would be the combination strength of these two genes, and that's how we come up to a conclusion. So once we have evaluated all the possible solutions, think of this as like trying to getting the highest value. Highest value will depend on the minimum value that we have for each of these minimal heuristic value that we have. So lesser the heuristic value, the higher the peak value would be. And depending upon that, we keep on choosing the higher values of the peaks. And finally, when we would have a genome set of solutions, which would be a combination of some of the peaks, which could be an ideal solution to the problem, while the rest of the problems would be discarded. Okay, so only this set of problems will be solution, and these could be some of the optimized or ideal solutions to the problem, not necessarily the accurate solution, but somewhere near close to the ideal solution. And if you look at it, I talked about like combining these numbers into something, right? So this will actually give us a set of combinations, right? It will give us a set of combinations which will consider, you can think of it as a population generation. So what we are doing is we are combining all set of solutions before even we go for the natural selection. We are creating a population of solutions. So what we have is, first of all, GA start with a population of many genomes with genes of each member set to random value. So why random values? Because initially we don't know which combinations could give us an ideal solution. So we do that randomly. So the number of the possible genes is surprisingly large. Like I said in earlier also, you can have lot of, like in here, you can have lot of combinations, right? So if you calculate it, you can have this much of possible genome values. Now that is the problem we have to solve when it comes to working with the genetic algorithm. For the tiny room genome in the previous section, each gene can take one of the 8 possible values. It was a small problem; it can be solved. But if you have a set of problems where you have 15 bits, and it becomes a bit more complicated, then you have much higher possible genome values. So the precise number of genomes in the product depends on the factors such as size of the state search space, and computer power. And the number of the genes in each genome depends on the number of the problem being tackled. So in earlier we just put three genes as representing each of the state, but depending on the problem we could have more genes associated with it, and then we would have more combinations of the genes to give different types of solutions as well. So depending upon how complicated the problem is that we are going to resolve. So again, to iterate it, what we are trying to understand that how we are basically bringing the concepts from the genetic biology into the genetic computing. And I hope this is a little bit, you have gotten some kind of intuition until now that how it works. Okay. Do you have any questions until now? If you have, please ask any questions. If you do any, don't hesitate to ask any questions if you have. Now recall, earlier I was telling you about the generation of the population. So the first thing that comes in the genetic algorithm, you create a population of the set of solutions, right? So initial solutions, what you have is, now recall the correct way to look at the genome is a potential solution to a problem. This is something that I have been repeating again and again. Returning to the question of what to do without time, we might articulate the problems. What are the conditions? Where can I go to the beach? In case only one represents the correct solution, we start with a random of these. In case too demanding, there are 4 possibilities, right? So just to see an example, like earlier that we were discussing, so this becomes the population in such just what we had discussed earlier in here. Like you had a set of solutions, you combine them together, and then this becomes a set of solution to each of the problems. Similarly, just to have a easier representation of a problem that is much smaller, so this becomes your gene pool, or this becomes your genome. So the computer can evaluate the outcome of applying the tests to each genome, except one will fail. Each genome 10 will tell us go to the beach. This is also something that I declared that already mentioned, that we chuck each of these solutions for the result that we get, and we see if that is the solution, denoting the shortest score or the peak of the highest fitness landscape. Something that I discussed earlier, right? You imagine it to be like a peak, and each of these peaks determine some kind of values, which will help us to find some kind of the solution, an ideal solution to the problem. And rest of the solutions that like come under this bar at the bottom of the valley, we simply discard it. Something that is, and this this happens only after the selection process. Once we select the ideal values and we discard the rest of the values. So from this we understood we have 3 basic elements of the genetic algorithm. We have genomes, we have a separate program that checks the fitness function, and then we have something called initial population of many genomes, right? From here we do something else. Once we have the initial population, we do something to arrive to the optimized solution. We do something. We follow the rest of the genetic concepts like inheritance or crossover. We haven't discussed those as yet, right? And then also mutation. So until here, what we are trying to do is we were trying to find a set of pool that would have actually maybe some ideal solution, but it gives a variety of solutions. There might be some good solutions, there might be some good bad solutions, but there could be all kinds of solutions in there. So these later genetic evolution and all that we are trying to do is we are trying to create new solutions that could be a better approach to resolve a particular problem. So how does crossover help? How does mutation help? How does inheritance help? We are going to see this concept in the few slides ahead. But these are the basic elements of the genetic algorithm. If you understood, by now I understand you would have understood the concept of genome very clearly. You would have understood a fit and separate program, which is akin to the natural selection to some extent in the evolution process, and then initial population, a set of solutions that could be an ideal based upon the peak of values that we have found. I hope this until here it's quite clear. Okay, so most of you must have. So what is the mutation? So mutation is the abrupt change of a gene which may not be inherited from either of the parents, right? Like for example, if you have, if you had if the parent is blue-eyed, let's say it's blue-eyed, and the mother is also, let's say, blue-eyed, but the child is having is green-eyed for some reason. It could be an environmental induced condition, or it could be a simply some kind of change. This change, which has not been inherited from either of the parents, is unlikely to happen in the child. This is called mutation. Now, why this mutation occurs? This mutation could be a response to the environment. Maybe this helps in the better adaptability for the survival of the child, or there could be other reasons to it. Generally, mutation is not regarded as a good thing. It's regarded as something that could lead to fatal consequences. But that's not always the case. It could be a good mutation also. So mutation refers to change made to organism genes at any point in organism's life. A majority of mutations are the result of introduction of errors when DNA is copied, although some may be created by radiation, chemicals, or other environmental factors. These errors may range from a failure to copy a single base correctly to the much less frequent reversal of series of bases. For instance, the sequence of these are like histamines copied as TGCA. The hemophilia passed on the descendants of it was almost. So basically, it's kind of a change in the genes, which is not normally supposed to happen, but it happens, and the reasons could be various. It could be an environmentally induced problem, or it could be a genetically induced problem. So, but it does happen. So we know that the chance of errors being introduced during copyright is extremely low. If the process were error prone, then inheritance itself will be endangered. So if it's the serious mutation which can actually lead to the elimination of the solution, or it can lead to the elimination of the individual. A beneficial mutation gives the host a better chance of surviving long enough to produce to pass the mutation to the future generations. Over the time, beneficial mutation likely to accumulate inside the breeding population. Given sufficient time, thousands of millions of the population will evolve to a state in which it no longer will be interbreed within the representatives of the original species. There will be two species. So what it means is some of the mutations that occur can actually induce some of the very good changes, and over the years, this mutation will develop so much that it would eventually generate a different species, which might be similar to the original parent species, but there are examples of it, like when people tend to migrate and they tend to adapt to the different kind of. So there are some changes that happen, and that these changes are eventually brought on to the generations. And what happens is the previous traits that they had from their parents in their grandfathers, they are no longer exhibited in the newer generation. So what you have is basically a completely new set of traits. But in here, it's a bit of extreme as it is mentioned, but I'm not sure how truth in there is therein. So according to them, they say that eventually it will be a completely different species, which will not be interbreed with the representatives of the original species. Basically, this is hinting to how humans have evolved from the apes. But we don't believe that, so I don't actually akin to this statement. So especially not our case, right? So this is mostly a Darwinian theory of concept, so we don't akin to it. But there are, like I said, but there are some parts of it like which do happen among the organisms for one or the different reasons, and mutation does happen. It can have different reasons for it. So we just adhere to that to understand, and how this concept is brought on into the genetic algorithms. We will see it in a while. So basically, we have set of solutions which could be like uh, uh, very different from what we had seen earlier. So they might give us a better approach to solving a problem. Earlier, I told you, right? So once we have a basic population, then the other concept comes up how we are going to reproduce better new solutions. And these solutions have to have some better traits, and some traits that could be from the combination of the parents. So this is what is called crossover. And this crossover is also inherited from the biological concept. It's where you have two, like I told you, like chromosomes. One comes from the father, one comes from the mother. right? And each of these have traits. So when they form together, what happens? Some part of this chromosome is aligned with this, and some part of chromosome is replaced with this part of the chromosome. So basically, this is an illustration of it. This is exactly how it happens. So what you have is you have we call it crossover. And it is a biological process. It happens, and this whole process is basically called, if I'm not correct, if I'm not mistaken, it's called meiosis. So what you have is 3 stages of crossover. 2 chromosomes, they line up together along one side. Special proteins weaken the part of the chromosome's DNA, allowing to drift away from its host chromosome and line up along the neighboring chromosome in the middle. So this one is basically a one strand of chromosome. This is one strand of chromosome. So and line up along the neighboring chromosome. So what happens is it drifts apart a bit and aligns with the neighboring chromosome. And finally, the DNA is grafted to its new chromosome, right? So basically, in this process, an exchange of information takes place, and it gives rise to an entirely new set of chromosomes. Okay? With this chromosome, will have different traits. It will have different characteristics. But of course, it will have borrowed characteristics from its parents also. So this is the concept of crossover. So in here, in this slide, so basically what we are trying to understand is how these genes actually take place. To give a better representation of it, I think uh, we already discussed this, but just to give give the representation of it. So I think this is where the introduction gamete is okay. So what you have is you have you have you have a male partner, right? This is just a summary of this slide, and you have a female partner, right? And each of these will have unique chromosomes. So usually male chromosome is XY and the female chromosome is XX. So these are called gametes, or you can call them gamete. Okay. A human gamete will contain only 23 out of original 46 chromosomes. So in here it's a pair, right? So after this it gets aligned. It remains either X or either Y. From here also it's Y or let's say X. If it's Y, then it is going to be a boy. If it's X, then it's going to be a girl. So let's say it's XX in here, but this part is, sorry, this is the chromosome, right? This is the chromosome in here. It separates. They form this is the gamete. So these gametes combine, let's say, and they exchange some information. Okay. This in here, when it's formed, it's called zygote. Okay. And this zygote later on develops into form a human, takes on to develop to get a human form. And whatever the traits this individual would have is basically it goes through a process of the selection, right? Where you have what kind of traits are exchanged. In here, the crossover takes place. Okay, so this is basically the gist of it. I'm not sure if you can clearly see it. So you have chromosomes. These get splitted out. You call them gametes. Now you have only 20. This one in here, these are 46 chromosomes. Now they get splitted out. There are only 23 chromosomes in here. Then they combine, mutually doing some going through the crossover exchange, and then again they form 46 chromosomes. And this individual, when these combine, they further on develop to a form. It's called zygote. and this zygote further develops into the human form. So it's basically it's a very it's a biological concept in here, but you have to understand that how this concept is borrowed into the genetic computing later. We talked about the population formation, a set of solutions, that is genome. From that genome, what we have is, think of it like this. So you have a set of solutions, right? That set of solutions, you from the fitness selection, you choose some of the traits in here, right? And from that, your gamete is formed, right? And then what you have is you have a population generation, right? So you have a set of solutions which will be using crossover and all. You will select some of the traits which are a better solution to the problem. So, and if you look at it, all these concepts like this crossover, inheritance, natural selection, and then adaptability, these are basically the Darwinian evolution concepts. From this, we understand. So what we have is, if we have to mimic the genetic algorithm process for the Darwinian evolution, so the three-step mating pool, a set of solutions, you can say. From this, we have optimal solutions, and then you create some new solutions from it. And that's what is called a create a new population. So you keep on repeating this step until you have a set of solutions which are very ideal to the problem that you're going to resolve. Now, let's look at an example of from the real world point of view. So what is the maximum score possible for rolling two conventional slided device? If you know the dice, how the dices work, so you have two dices which have like 6 faces. Each of these 6 faces have different dots assigned to it, but these range from 1 to 6. And if you have 2 dice, the combination of both the dices will actually, the maximum value they can give us is 6, 6 on each of these faces, 6 dots on each of these faces, and we will have the maximum value is 12. So what you have is basically the dice are represented using a genome with 2 genes. So this is 1 gene, and this is a combination of 3 genes, combination of bits, 3 bits in there. We can represent each dice using 3 bits capable of holding values between 0 and 7, which is more than enough for the possible values from 1 to 6. Therefore, our genome will contain 6 bits. So what you have is for the die value 1, we will have the binary value of it. Die value 2, we have the binary value for it. And at the beginning of our experiment, the population contains random dice genome, right? So it can have any combination of the genome on the dice given the value, right? But from here we have to choose which will maximize the value of the genome. That is the best solution because we want the highest number, right? So in here, what we have is die 1 has 6, die 2 has 4. So this is the highest value. This is the best solution that we can get from it, from the other examples or from the other genomes that we have. Again, think of this like the heuristic value associated with it if you're going to solve the trail cells problem. So genomes are then passed on through a fitness function. Now we will see which one has it. In this case, since you're looking at maximum sum of the 2 dice, we will simply add the values of the 2 dice. The result will be a fitness value for each genome, and these values with the higher values are to be fitter than those with the fitter genome with the better solution that it represents. Since the genome B combination has the highest value, we say this is the best solution. After that, solution D can be the best solution. After that, solution genome C can be the best solution, and finally genome 6, right? From the table above, it can be seen. So genome B is the high fitness solution with a score of 10. The fitness value directly influences the likelihood of a genome going through and later rounds of simulation. This high fitness values are more likely to survive. Those that are least fit are more likely to be discarded. The genes selected for survival will enter the mating pools from which future generations can bred. Okay, this is something that we have already discussed earlier, but this is just a getting more closer to an understanding from the real problem perspective. So once you have like a set of solutions, from this set of solutions, you have the best solutions taken. Like for example, what we can do is the least solution is the A. We can simply discard it, and we can keep rest of the solution. And this can go into the mating pool, where that would be a set of solutions, which could be an ideal problem to the ideal solution to the problem that we are going to resolve. Also, you can visualize this a peak of values. Like for example, the 10 is here, uh, uh, 6 is here. So using this heuristics, what we do is we draw some kind of fitness line, and we simply discard this one. We keep these three peaks as in the optimal mating pool solution. And the gene selected for the soil will enter the mating pools from which the future generations can be bred. So we can have a set of solutions, a combination of these three values, to generate more values that would help us to come to an ideal solution. So the actual method for choosing the fitness zones is left up to the GI designer. You can use different like schematics, different selection processes. How do you want to do it? So that is up to the genetic algorithm designer. The simplest is to exclusively simply select the genes with the highest fitness value and discard the rest. And this fitness value can have, like you saw some examples in here, it's a combination of the sum of the face values of die1 and die2. In the TSP, it was some heuristic value. So you can always choose some kind of fitness value, up to you. That would be in your thing. That could be a better that would help you to better optimize the landscape for the much optimal solution. So the genes selected for the survival enter mating pool, which can future generations can bred. Okay, this method is generally select the fittest genomes, but relatively unsuited genomes, some chances of passing into the mating pool. Okay, you have to also uh, so if you take a, earlier I also mentioned, if you take a very stringent policy of trying to fitness, you may find like only the list of the highest values of probable solutions, but you will not have a diversity of getting the combinations of future better solution, because you're going to combine some of the solutions together, right? So that's why it is mentioned that it's always a good reason to prefer more subtle strategy to introduce an element of randomness into the selection. So, and this method will actually help us the fittest genomes, but gives a relatively unsuccessful genome some of chance passing into the mating pool, just to have some of variety, as to the Darwinian rules, to some kind of variety or some kind of variation in the set of solutions. So when we combine these set of solutions, we can actually generate new strategies and new methods and new optimal solutions that could be the ideal way to go ahead to solve the problem. And one such method is, this is actually used, this concept is called bias roulette wheel. This is something that what we use in casinos. So you have basically a combination of different colored set points, and there is a one random ball that is supposed to get into one of these spaces, and that would determine the kind of step that you would take next. So basically what you have is, it takes some particular colors or numbers selected at a random. Small ball is thrown on this spinning wheel. It bounces around at random and comes to a rest if at one of these slots. So only one of the slots is supposed to have some more value to it. The rest of the slots simply mean that the user is going to lose some kind of money. So the probability of arriving at a solution is very less. So GA-route wheel is similar idea. It will have a number of slots, one for each genome in the population, right? So if we basically, what would happen is each genome would be some kind of solution to a problem, but the ball would help us to randomly select one solution there, and from there on we generate rest of the solution. So although in conventional model each slot has an equal chance of being selected, the GA wheel is biased towards slotting representing some genomes with fitter values. A percentage of the wheel is allocated to each of the genomes. So in the GA wheel, what will happen is, I think it's in the next slide, what we will see is uh, we will have these slots, but these slots will have some heuristic value associated to it or some fitness value associated to it. And based on those fitness solutions, we will try to select the chamber or the space. And how do we calculate the fitness value it? Let's say they have a fitness value it. We total the whole of the fitness value, that is 31, and we see the percentage of how much percentage it has among the whole of the whole of the other values. So the higher the percentage it has, the better the chances of it is being to have a good solution. So like in this case, its heuristic fitness value is 10. So that's why we will choose. It has a 32% of higher chance of getting. So that's how we select a particular section for the solution. So the wheel is now spun once for each of the genomes, and the result is recorded. 4 sets of our genes we will spin it 4 times, and each spin is simulated using a random number from 0 to 100. If the random number generated produces a value between 0 to 95, 0 to 19.4 and 57 range of this one, and then we will be chosen, and so on. So basically what happened is, depending upon the values that we get, we choose the appropriate genome. So we will make the round go for 4 times. Each time the router starts or stops at any of these genome values. We just select that and we put it in the gene pool or the mating pool. Okay. This is just an example of it. Okay. Now this is something to I think we will take a small break in here, students. I'll just take 2-minute break before I come back. I just want to drink water. 2-minute break, and we will continue from here. So if you do you have any questions until now? So let's go back a bit and let's think from here, right? Okay, I think until now it's clear. It should be clear. So what we have is we randomly uh, select the genomes using a router-based wheel, right? And once we have that randomly selected, we would have some values created for the random selection, like from value 0 to 100. If the value is between 19 to 50, let's say 32% of the range, then B would be selected. And if it's less than that, then A will be selected, and so on. So, okay. So now we have a random selection process. And let's say because of this random selection process, what you have is, it's high likely chance that you may not have the most ideal solution selected, or you may not have the but since the probability, the higher percentage is there, so it could be that we would have B more than others, be selected in each of the iterations. We could have genome be selected, but nevertheless, there is a chance of weaker solutions also getting selected. So let's say example, we have after the spin 1, 2, and 3 and 4, we have like first at the first spin, solution A was selected, genome A was selected. After the spin 2, D was selected, and after the 3 spin, B was selected, and after the 4th spin, again the B was selected. So what we would have is now we can see from the results. So we would have 2 copies of B that will enter the mating pool, right? And like I mentioned, it's because of the random nature of the wheel, a relatively strong genome C, which is a strong genome C, then A has not been selected, right? Was not selected for the mating pool, while the relatively weaker genome A has been chosen. What does this mean? This means that the role wheel does not basically guarantee the elimination of the weaker genomes, but it is possible that also that no copies of the stronger genome will pass into the mating pool and that no genome will be eliminated. These are also the possibilities because we are creating a random initialization, random pool. But if you look at it, it should consist of the pool which would have higher values with the highest genome, right? So, but anyhow, once the mating pool is generated, the algorithm then moves on to the next step, populating the next generation. Right? Remember, I told you after we have uh, uh, these are the steps to the creating a genetic algorithm. So first of all, you do some random initialization. You have some idea of some random solution. So you can use any method. One of the method you can use is bias roulette wheel. So what you have is due to some assigned heuristic values, you randomly select them based on that value. So let's say each value you have in the mating pool, now you have a set of solutions or you have a set of genome. The selected genome is selected with a set of genes in there. That is, it represents the set of solutions that can be combined. And once you have, after that, what you do is you start populating the next generation. So how do we do that? So since the new mating pool is now created, so we have to we combine the different types of genes. Since in here, let's say for example, there were 4 genomes, so the 2 dips must be made into the mating pool. So what we'll have A and B and B and A. This is the combination of the gene. Like for example, if the value was 001 and then B is 100, it will be like this. And the other combination will be 110001. So the randomness of dipping process means there is no guarantee that only strong genes will be selected and preferentially discarded weaker genes for the population while retaining originally created, repeating the process of. Okay, so this is what I have been I had already mentioned, that because of the randomness, we don't know whether all the stronger genes would be selected or not. So, but since we tend to discard the weaker genomes from the population while retaining the stronger ones, we're going to follow the rest of the process. So we will repeat the process by applying the fitness function. We will spin the roulette wheel again, and we will perform the mating pool again. And this would eventually result in a population that would be that would have some ideal solution to the problem. So it's quite likely that these would be some of the fittest genomes present among the original random population, but we can be less sure that they are the fittest genomes possible. Like I said, again, there is a possibility that some of the solutions would not be ideal. So how to ensure that? So to ensure we find the fittest possible genome, we must create a new population genome based on the relatively successful genome chosen from the mating pool. So what you have is you create diversity. Like I told you earlier also, you have the combination of the different set of genes, and this is where the evolution happens. So you had the initialization when you randomly select. So first initialization is you randomly select the values. Then you generate a you do a selection process, right? You generate population. You repeat this process until you have some kind of ideal solution, right? Some kind of solution. Then to form the process of evolution, this is crossover, right? From there, what you do is, sorry, from here, this is the random population, and this is you repeat the process, and then here you do some combination, and this is the crossover. Now we are going to do, this would be the concept of evolution. So, so how do we do this? So we have random selection, right? We have random initialization, then we have selection, then we have population generation, and now we are going to talk about evolution. Evolution happens through crossover of the genes of genome. Earlier, I told you that some part of the chromosomes is cut and it falls over the other. That process is called chromosome. That process is called crossover. So how do we do that in the real example? So for example, in here you have two genomes. You have P and Q as a genome. Is a set of solution. From what you do is you take entirely these parent genomes do not cross over. Instead, they pass on to the next generation without any alteration. Okay, so let's say we have two genomes in here, and we pass on to create a new mating pool so that the new generation is formed. If you don't do any crossover, this will be passed on the next generation as it is. But what if we do crossover and we do some schematic crossover? And what we do is we basically split at a random point, and two new child genomes will be created. And what would happen is basically we keep part as it is. One part is as it is, but in this part we change this bit from dark from Q. We change this dark to the white. So this will give rise to a completely new genome, a new set of solution, that is R. Similarly, for S, for Q, what you do is you take the parent as P. The main part is as it is from the Q. This part is as it is from the Q. But for this initial part, you remove the white bit with a darker bit. So what you will have is you will have new set of solutions R and S that is different from the P and Q. So this is the concept of crossover. So imagine these to be bits. So when you exchange the bits, you will have a completely new set of solution, which we can see if that matches up to the ideal solution. So evolving genes by crosses is an example. For example, you have two genes, right? So you have two genes, 0, 0, 1, 1, 0, 1, 1, and you have this A. Then you have B, 1, 1, 1, 0, 1, 0. So what you do is you simply first you keep this as it is, 0, 1, 1. You only change will be just exchange the first two bits, right? First two bits. So that would be what? 0, 1, 1. And we just exchange, that would be 1, 1. And this one will be the same. Third bit will be the same. So you will have one child like this. And the other child, you keep 0, 1, 0 as it is. Change the first two bits only. That is already the same, right? So you will have this one will change a 0 from here. And the rest two is 1, 1 is the same. So you will have 0, 1, 0 as this one. Okay. So remember, in this, half of it remains the same, like in this case. We only change one bit in here, second bit in here. Similarly, for the first part remains the same. We only change the second bit in here, and then you have a different set of solutions, R and S. So this one inherited this part from P and this bit from Q as a change from crossover, and this S inherited major 3 bits from Q, and only the second bit from is modified from P. So you get a different set of solutions. Same thing happens in here. Now imagine this to be in the terms of bits. So you will have a different set of solution. Now how this, you will have some numericals in the next class which we are going to take up. So it will reinforce the idea of how it works. Just go through this chapters or the slides again later on. It will help you to get a better understanding of the concept, inshallah. So evolving genomes by crossover. So remember, now we took the concept from initial, we randomly initialize. Unfortunately, my mouse doesn't let me using a route wheel, right? Then we had some kind of selection also process to it, selection process, fitness selection. Then we generate the population. We generated the population, right? And then from here, we do some evolution using crossover, right? Among this population that we earlier had. So from here, evolution, the next part would be the using crossover, right? The next part of the algorithm of genetic algorithm is mutation. And this completes the process of genetic algorithm. So this is the whole concept of genetic algorithms. Okay, so crossover creates a crossover creates large changes in the genome between generations. The rate of crossover directly influences the rate of at which the pool diversifies. The rate of crossover chosen by the designer solution, what rate of is probably too low. So basically, depending upon the genetic like algorithm designer, he can choose how many bits he can, the rate of crossover he can choose based on its simulation and based upon the uh, state of how close how fast that he wants to find the solution among the peak value. And finally, you have something evolving genomes by mutation. Just as biological genomes are subject to copyright and other errors, there's a possibility while crossover, we will have some very outlier-based solution, So, but minor changes can have large consequences. So if the decider to permit the mutation of gene is generally agreed to the process are relatively rare, overfrequent mutation can result in the field destroyed by the random change to the contents. So with the mutation, we have to be careful that what kind of mutation that we want. So as a designer for the genetic algorithm, so we have to consider whether we allow it or we don't. And if we allow it, we should be aware of that what kind of random changes to be happening in the algorithm. So this is also a basic is a concept of biological traits. So how do we create the mutation in the algorithm? I think this is an example of it. So what you have is you have a so we choose which part of the algorithm that we actually cause for the mutation. We manually induce it. So in here, what we choose is we replace the second bit of this gene, and we have a mutated gene P prime, right? So similarly, in here, it can occur during the crossover also. We can do the simple crossover, but in addition, we can change the values of a certain bits. Like for example, in here, we can change this from the resolving, sorry. Like for example, in this case, during the crossover, we have changed the bit, right? We kept this part as it is, but we changed the value changing as a part of the crossover. Similarly, this value of the change is, this bit also is changed while changing this part also in here. So this is a simple exercise. So how to for the formulation of the mutation, we will take up some of the questions in the next session. So, but just to we have a takeaway uh, from this concept from this class. So it's just to understand that what steps the genetic algorithm is based on having inference from the biological world. So I hope you get the understanding of it. This is the main gist of it. So what you have is you will have random initialization of some values. From the random initialization, what we have is we will select those values based on some fitness or heuristic value that which could be an ideal solution. From there, what we will try to do is we will try to have different permutations of these and see and selection based on that how close they are to the solution. Once we have that, we will generate new reproduction and new population, which would give us new ways to the new entries to the solution pool. We call it right. And once we have that, we can experiment with the evolution of it, mutation of it, that we can change some of the traits here and there and try to see if it makes us come closer to a better solution. So in the next class, what we're going to see is we're going to see much mathematical representation of these. This was more of a theoretical representation of an understanding of the genetic algorithms. But like I said, you have to understand the basic steps to it. I believe the basic steps are there. You have understood it. And inshallah, in the next class, we are going to take we are going to take the broader understanding of it through the numericals. We will do some exercises, and we will try to understand how actually it works under the hood. So a bit detailed understanding of it. So main takeaway from the today's lecture was that what happens in the why these steps are taken and how these steps of references to the biological world. But if you don't remember anything from this lecture, just remember the steps of this algorithm. That is, you do some random initialization. From the random initialization, you do some fitness selection. Depending on the designer of the genetic algorithm, what kind of heuristics you want to do, what kind of selection, on what basis you want to do selection. We saw different examples of it, right? Like we saw travel salesman problem, we saw the dice problem, right? So depending on the problem, you can use different selection, fitness selection. So once you have it, then after that you see that how we can combine these solutions. You put them these samples in a set of pool. So now you have a set of genes. You combine them together to create a genome. So that becomes a set of solution. This set of solutions you can combine through crossover and see what could be the next set of solutions that you would get. Maybe they are more closer to the ideal solution or not. Then you repeat the process of the fitness and see which can be discarded and which can be kept. Again, you have a set of population which might be more closer to the ideal solution. So you keep on repeating the process until you reach to a solution, an ideal solution, right? And finally, you can do something called mutation also. You you induce some changes deliberately and see if that brings us to a much better solution. So this is the concept behind the genetic algorithm. Now, all the steps that we have taken is much taken up from is much influenced from the biological world. If you have understood it, I hope you have. So much of these steps are taken from the biological world, and we have tried to emulate that in the simulation. But in the next class, we'll be seeing a little bit more detail of it, how these steps take place, how do the calculations take place, perhaps through some exercises and stuff. And that would conclude the majority portion of this AI class. And the final class would be the reinforcement learning, few slides of it. And we are going to talk about reinforcement learning. Reinforcement learning is an important subject as well because it's picking up the pace in the modern AI robotics arena. So we will talk about it in a brief. We will have a brief session on it also as the final class. So, like I said, and finally, we will have evolving genes. So, it's basically these are the steps that you have to follow to create a genetic algorithm. You don't have to start from the base. So, if you have like we can always look online tutorials how to create genetic algorithms. But let's see if we can do that exercise in the next class. So we'll show a basic demonstration of through code that how the genetic algorithms work. But anyhow, I think we will conclude this session for today. If you have any questions, you can ask. Let me know if the understanding is clear. If not, you can always come back to me and ask for the questions. Maybe I will try my best to answer those questions. So any questions from this class today?